Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Kashyap Kompella and I'm a research director with the Real Story Group. I'm your host for today. So what's our topic today? Let me set a bit of a context here. So it's 2017 and where do we think the enterprise social collaboration software marketplace currently is? And where do we think it is headed? What are the key trends here? And how could these trends affect your own social collaboration projects? So if you're an IT leader or a collaboration manager or an enterprise architect, or practically anyone with a stake in the organization's collaboration software initiatives has a lot of takeaways here. You'll understand the current state of this marketplace and gain an insight into the maturity of leading products and technologies. So that's our topic today. So before we get started, a quick introduction to the Real Story Group. Real Story Group is an independent analyst and advisory firm. We analyze the weaknesses and strengths of the leading tools and vendors in the marketplaces that we cover. We advise and mentor organizations on successful technology selection. And we also, after selecting the technology and implementing that, benchmark your digital effectiveness. What's different about RSG is that we solely work for the buyers of technology and we never do any work, no consulting, no white papers, no webinars with the sellers or the vendors of these technologies. So next, a quick look at our coverage areas, broadly digital workplace and marketing technologies. We cover 8 software segments in this space: web content and experience management, digital and marketing asset management, enterprise collaboration and social software, campaign and lead management, enterprise portals, enterprise content management and cloud file sharing, and lastly SharePoint and Office 365 family of technologies. So we are a buyer's advocate for enterprises looking to invest in digital transformation, and our USP is in-depth research that analyzes the weaknesses and strengths of technology vendors. So this is our famous subway map. In this you can see all the vendors that we evaluate in one place. Each line on this subway map refers to one specific coverage area. Today we're looking at this red line, or the enterprise collaboration line. You can get a high resolution version of this map at realstorygroup.com/vendor map, the URL you see at the bottom of the screen. So do check it out. In one graphic it lays out this entire marketplace. Where do they intersect? What are the specialist players? Who are the platforms that are offering and playing in different marketplaces, etc. So do check it out. So let's look at today's agenda, the specific agenda. So before that, I mean, this is very heavily focused on the digital workplace. So let me try to define the digital workplace. So at RSG, we define a digital workplace as the digital systems that employees use to get work done. I know that's a broad definition, but in practice, any knowledge-centric organization needs to excel at enterprise social collaboration. So that's why, I mean, to be sure, several related technologies become relevant depending on your context and industry. Indeed, I mean, we evaluate 50 plus vendors across different digital workplace technologies. But effective social collaboration becomes table stakes for a truly employee-centric digital workplace. So we recently released a major update to the vendor evaluations in this enterprise collaboration and social software research stream. And based on our discussions and analysis of vendor products and analysis of the collaboration projects across industries, it revealed some very interesting currents of change. So we're going to take a short tour of the trends, what's hype versus what's reality, how some progressive organizations are moving from static intranets to the digital workplace and employee-centric digital workplace, and who are the vendors that are prominent in this segment. And lastly, you'll also get a very quick look at the employee experience technology stack that we're just coming up with. This is a brand new research and nobody has seen this before, so you're going to see it the first time today. So let's look at some of the trends that the popular press and media and even some analysts champion. So there is a lot of talk about virtual reality, wearables in the enterprise, machine learning, artificial intelligence. So there is a lot of hype around these technologies. I mean, you you, you think a lot of organizations are actually implementing these technologies, deriving a lot of value out of these technologies, and they've really become cognitive workplaces. So in many organizations, we also see there is a sense of fear of missing out because when they look at their own collaboration initiatives, it tends to be more plain vanilla and mundane. But everywhere they look in the press, it looks like people are harnessing things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, bots and whatnot to sort of improve employee collaboration. But when you actually look at the data, when you actually talk to a lot of customers, you will find that there is a reality check. And that is today, for a vast majority of the organizations, the digital workplace is the intranet. All the technologies that you saw on the previous slide, they are still very immature. The vendors are hyping them a bit, and the press loves good stories. So if there is a pilot that is being tried out, they declare victory as if this is a very mature technology that's ready to be implemented. So, but the current reality is that a very information heavy static collection of website passes off for the intranet. So there is a whole bunch of technical debt that aggregates and accumulates in the intranet. So it's interesting to look in this slide where exactly do the enterprises really stand today. So we've been doing a lot of industry surveys. Here is data that you see from two surveys that we conducted a few years apart in 2014 and 2016. So broadly, you can tend to think you can think of enterprise collaborations consisting of a few, maybe 10 or 12 very typical archetypical use cases. Project collaboration, knowledge-based management, and communities of practice being the more mature among these more long-standing and more mature use cases. You can also think of these use cases as business applications, or what are the applications that various organizations are putting social collaboration technology to use for. So you look at the data and see that the maturity of these traditional collaboration use cases is probably anywhere between 40 to 55%, and it's more or less stable across the years. So the message from this is about half the organizations have been able to attain a high level of maturity on these use cases. But when you look at some of the newer use cases, such as external collaboration, such as innovation and idea management, such as social networking oriented, such as social Q&A and socializing legacy processes or expertise location, it tells a very different story. The maturity of these use cases ranges anywhere between 25 or 23% to about 35%. So a quarter to a third of the organizations that we surveyed have been able to achieve high level of maturity on these use cases. That means nearly two-thirds, the majority of the organizations are still not able to master these use cases. So, I mean, let's take a pause and think about the implications here. So organizations are still trying to get a good handle on these newish use cases, but this is not rocket science. So they definitely are a long way away from a cognitive workplace or an artificial intelligence, machine learning driven workplace that learns and that sort of presents the right application and the right context for employees. So, but at the same, while this is where the organizations are, an interesting thing is happening on the employee side. So the employee expectations of these digital tools are higher than ever. So today, employees expect tools to bring the same consumer grade usability that they are exposed to on the internet outside of their workplaces. So they want to be able to use these collaboration tools without a lot of training. They expect these tools to support their preferred ways of working, be it asynchronous messaging or real-time chat or instant messaging, or even open-ended interactions such as social networking. And they want all of this to happen not in a silo, but in the context or in the flow of their work. Also, they want these tools to be fully mobile enabled. And they're spending a lot of time on these smartphones. So it's a reasonable expectation. And they want these tools to be available to them on the go. And there is also an expectation that these should be smart tools, that they get to know the users, their preferences, their modes of working, and they get better with usage. So in response, the enterprise approach, I mean, at least on the progressive organizations, the collaboration is evolving, or in some cases that there hasn't been much progress, but it has to evolve. So the enterprises are definitely beginning to acknowledge the importance of employee digital experiences. So they evaluate collaboration projects with a cloud first mindset. Even though they may initially deploy on-premise, they're looking for hybrid alternatives or a roadmap to get to the cloud. So as a consequence, they're looking for very short implementation cycles, and that also favors the SaaS or software as a service based alternatives for the tools they chose. In essence, enterprises, there is a very clear preference among enterprises for applications to demonstrate very clear and immediate business value. These tools should solve a very specific problem for a specific group of employees. So in essence, you could say that a key trend or a key undercurrent is that we're shifting from a static intranet to a more employee-centric digital workplace. So the employee-centric digital workplace, it really, think of it as a collection of services that is role-based. It has a lot of dashboards, like dashboards based on what kind of work you're trying to accomplish. There is a lot of interaction with your peers in the form of social Q&A in context. There's a lot of sharing between peers and different colleagues in different teams and departments. You have a searchable knowledge base for the content, for the organizational know-how. You also have like online communities to exchange knowledge, to collaborate on specific business processes or work routines. So that's the shift to the digital workplace that is happening. So what has been the vendor response? You'll see that the vendors are scrambling to adapt to these shifts in both the employee expectations as well as the enterprise approach and this shift to the digital workplace. So we have seen that, we have been covering this marketplace for more than a decade now. And we have seen that several vendors have exited or retreated or have narrowed their focus and pivoted. There are also new players that have entered the market. For instance, our latest research goes into great depth on a few vendors like Facebook Workplace, which is sort of a late entrant into this space, as well as team chat or instant messaging applications such as Slack. You'll have 10 to 12 page evaluations of these tools in our research. But what happens is in this marketplace, even though there are a lot of big names, with the possible exception of Microsoft SharePoint, very few vendors can boast a meaningful market share. So in a sense, these larger vendors, they're challenged to provide ready-to-use applications, but they're used to providing foundational building blocks and that require major interventions such as custom development and extensions and integrations. While SharePoint has had a dominant share, they're making this transition into the cloud to Office 365 and SharePoint Online, and that has exposed a lot of gaps in Microsoft's own portfolio. So in summary, this is a long tail market. There are several vendors that are known primarily in their home markets or for very specific applications, or you'll find a lot of niche or specialist vendors that are focused on a very specific limited set of use cases. In our research, we continue to cover smaller niche players and also social layer vendors, and all of these find traction among enterprise customers. So one message we consistently see is that no single platform or product can meet the diversity of all your enterprise collaboration and social software requirements. If you look at the landscape itself in terms of the vendors that we cover, they run the gamut. There are the major platform vendors, IBM with their flagship connections, but sometimes you get the feel that it is still a bit of an appendage to their other efforts around portals and document management. And there are pros and cons to that. I mentioned about SharePoint. You have SharePoint and Office 365. They're increasingly very different environments, and our research, I mean, I encourage you to look at our research. It goes into a lot of detail there. Oracle, they only seem to have had a glancing interest over the years in this space, but really they have been very quiet rather of late. And they seem to be pushing a lot of this through their HR tools and Fusion middleware. They haven't been making a lot of dent in this space. Next, you have these major suites. Drupal, a lot of change happening in the ecosystem there. Google is, I mean, increasing its focus on this segment. Relatively late entry, but they are led by their very strong email offering. They're hoping to get a lot more traction. SAP's ambition seems to be limited to their walled garden, which itself is considerable. And then there is Jive, a long-standing player with a lot of global 2000 customers. We don't have the time to go into the details of each of these vendors, but I'll just comment at the category level. You'll have a lot of interesting vendors in the smaller suites category. There is Atlassian and a bunch of social intranet in a box or social intranet vendors in this space. Thought Farmer, Traction, Igloo, Interact. And on the right you have the social enterprise layers. Yammer, perhaps the most well-known vendor in this space. There's also Salesforce, there is Tibco, VMware, Socialcast, and then I mentioned Workplace. And on this left side you have specialist players, Slack, the team chat application, and Harmony, which is really filling some gaps in the Microsoft stack. So if you're a subscriber, you'll know that we also publish every year a market analysis or the reality check chart of each of the spaces that we cover. So this one is the 2017 edition of the Collaboration Social Software Reality Check. So what you see here is a 2x2 or a 3x3 grid. So on the x-axis you see the pace of change at a particular vendor. On the y-axis here you see the pace of change in the product itself. The size of the vendor represents, I mean, the size of the bubble represents the size of the vendor, while these different colors represent how much of a focus a vendor has on this specific segment itself, or how important or how significant is this space to a particular vendor. So there is no right or wrong place in this in this landscape. There is no magic place or a most favored grid. But really, there is a sweet spot perhaps if there is a pace of if there is a match in the pace of change at the vendor with your own appetite for risk or change. A lot of early adopter customers may like vendors who are doing a lot of refreshes, who are bringing in new innovation or new product features at a rapid clip, while some other organizations may prefer vendors that are going steady. So do consult our reality check briefing. We also talk about the trends in more detail out there and also call out what are the major initiatives at each of these vendors. So we've talked about a lot of things here. We talked about the changing employee expectations, the evolving enterprise approach, the shift to the digital workplace, and some of the players and how fast or how soon they are changing. So what does all of this mean for your collaboration technology choices? So it's clear that as new use cases emerge, a single platform or a product will not adequately address all of them. So as an enterprise customer, you may have to plan to complement the capabilities of your main collaboration hub. You'll have a main collaboration hub, which is the backbone of your digital workplace, and complement or supplement that with surrounding it with some other products. There are a lot of new and nimble vendors. They may provide fast innovation, but that may come at the cost of administrative functionality such as compliance and security. So do test carefully. There has to be a balance between innovation and these new the innovation and admin related functionality. So our advice would be that make sure that you assess your current effectiveness and uncover any capacity gaps by benchmarking against your peers, and identify your top priority use cases, and assess which of the technologies are a best fit for your main use cases. So we've developed this to help companies make that transition from the intranet to the digital workplace. We've developed a model called the employee centered reference model. This really is, I mean, a pretty simple logic behind this model, that you put employees at the center of all your systems. So this is like a concentric layers of circles, each layer encapsulating a different set of services and different set of applications. So we've written about this. If you're a subscriber, I would encourage you to look at the advisory on the employee-centered digital workplace model, where we also describe in great detail how you can use this to assess your current state. Broadly, I mean, the idea is that you identify what are your top priorities, where you're currently strong in each of these arcs, and then where you want to focus going forward. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go into the details of that, but if you're interested, please do reach out to us, and we can have a separate discussion around that. So lastly, I want to talk a bit about this employee experience technology, or the MPEX tech stack. I'm pretty excited about this new research. So the context here is that we all know that high quality digital experiences are table stakes in the consumer world. So great user experience or UX may not practically be achieved, but at least there is a general level of awareness of how that's a competitive differentiator, and all businesses should aspire to improve the user experience for their customers. But what about digital experiences? So maybe some progressive organizations are investing here, but most enterprises still only pay scant attention, or at least they should be paying more attention to UX for the tools that their employees use every day. So it's not that organizations find employee engagement unimportant. It's just that they fail to make the connection between the quality of the digital tools that their employees use to get their work done, and between employee engagement. So organizations, we find that pay a lot of attention to the physical aspects of the workplace itself. I mean, you've heard of how Google has a fabulous campus. So perhaps inspired by the likes of Google, enterprises will pay a lot of attention to getting the physical office environment right. Leaders will spend a lot of time, they'll sweat out all the details about whether the location of the office is convenient or not, what's the office layout, the overall look and feel, the furniture, and whatnot. So the underlying assumption is that such investments will pay off, that a comfortable workplace means employees will be more productive, more engaged, and less likely to depart. But it's interesting to ask, what's the real office? And for knowledge workers, and by the way, up to half of the workforce in the US, the screens and the applications required for their work is the digital workplace. And I'll let that sink in. The screens and the applications that you use for your work is the digital workplace. So think about it. I mean, getting work done requires interacting with specific line of business systems, communication, collaboration applications, as well as other systems such as learning and knowledge management tools. And our hypothesis here is that just like organizations have their own distinct cultures, the digital applications of your organization, they embody the digital culture of your organization. the quality of these applications and tools will have a direct bearing on the employee productivity and job satisfaction. And all of this, you can see, links to employee engagement. So according to me, the case for high quality digital experiences is a no-brainer. So we often get asked that that's fine, but where do we start? So the answer is this employee experience technology stack that you're seeing right now. So there are consider the three categories in this landscape chart. There is collaboration and communication, there is self-service, and there is HR and major lines of business. So these are the tools that nearly everyone has to use. I mean, you won't use all of these tools, but you'll use a sliver of these tools based on your organization, department, and your role. So you get these three categories right, and you're headed in the right direction. So we're going to be talking a lot about this in the coming months. So head over to mpexwatch.com to start a conversation, to start participate in the dialogue around this employee experience technology stack. So lastly, thanks for joining today. If you're intrigued by any of our research or interested to explore further, you can get a sample complimentary evaluation for each of the streams that we cover at this realstorygroup.com/sample URL. Check us out on LinkedIn for the latest and greatest updates, or follow us on Twitter at realstorygroup. And you can also get in touch with our account teams at explore@realstorygroup.com. And if you want to pick up the phone, these are the numbers. So that's pretty much what we have time for today. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you do stay engaged with the Real Story Group. Bye bye.